Hello, hello. Good morning, good day. Hello world, my name is Code Eric, and I'm here to hack on the ZERVE app as per usual. If you're joining me live, don't comment on the music. It's my little secret. It'll be a little secret between you and me for the live viewers, all 0 of you. But maybe some of you will turn up. Okay. Today, what am I doing? I'm working on the back end of the ZERVE app because I try to work on the part that's the most neglected and the part that worries me the most. And yeah, the ZERVE app does not really have much of a multi-tenant backend right now. I've been kind of working on that, but that's the dream today, is making it so that we have an actual multi-tenant backend setup working, so that several different users can come in, create their own track, their own. Sorry, I'm distracted by the music in my ear right now because this guy is freestyling live, or not live. It's a recording, but I'm hearing hearing rapping in my ear while I'm trying to speak, which I'm not very good at. Usually, I'm listening to lo-fi or something. But that's not your problem. That's my problem. Let's see. We got a blank slate here. I'm just going to jump into the code and mess around. I've been working on ZERVE's top secret documentation website, but you're here to enjoy the VOD, so I think I can reveal to you what the top secret documentation website is. It's at docs.zerve.app. It's pretty empty right now on the home screen because the docs home screen, I don't know if I'm going to use this home screen really for anything, but I've been writing a few documentations, and this doc is kind of a little bit about the spiritual intent behind the ZERVE product. And I also wrote this very high-level and ambitious doc about the ZERVE vision. And I'd love to hear your feedback on it if you're enjoying this content or if you're not enjoying it. Just let me know what you think about this media. I've got a little bit of a long-term vision for ZERVE, and this doc kind of goes into some detail about that. But you can check that out on your own time. For now, I'm gonna jump into the code. Jump in, write some code. Shouldn't I? Shouldn't I write some code? So there's yarn dev, which starts the front end and also a sort of very simple back end. And I can show you the code for the back end, but really I'm going to go work on a different back end today. So let's close the docs, make it a little bit bigger. Instead of apps, there's Zoo Server Standalone. So Zoo Server Standalone. Here, maybe I can. Oh yeah, you can see the title. Hello to my one viewer. I hope this. Oh hey, welcome Elite Fusion. Thanks for dropping in and chatting. I'm working on totally different tech, but the same product as usual. And I'm listening to an improv music stream that I can turn off for you while still enjoying for myself. So let me know if this background audio is driving you crazy. I'll turn him down when he's chatting. Maybe turn up for some of the music. So our Zoo Server Standalone. There's different backends that I can run, and yarn dev just runs the simple backend where it sets up a data directory. It creates a general store with that data directory. It also gives it a cache, basically, using the same directory. And then we package up two different parts of the API. One is the quote-unquote public part, this .state that can be consumed. And then there's the public store. And this is all using like this custom Z framework or toolkit that I've created for this project. But basically, you can take any Z API and expose it on the server with a single line. So that's how we start the server on a given port. And yeah, I'm going to be hacking on alternative backends here. So there's this simple zoo server standalone, but then there's also the Zebra server, and that's what I want to work on today because this is like the production server. What am I working on right now? I'm working on my project called ZERVE. You can check out my YouTube channel for like probably more context on what ZERVE is, because I made some content maybe a little while ago, but the product hasn't changed. So my YouTube channel has maybe better content, maybe more consumable content. I do recommend jumping in there. And here, maybe I'll turn on chat. How do I turn on chat? So yeah, thanks for pulling in, and yeah, feel free to check out the YouTube channel and come back here once you've got a better idea of what I'm hacking on. But it's basically a content management system, and also like I've been working on this documentation website. I'll just drop the link in chat for fun. But I've got two different docs that are kind of worth checking out: the introduction and the vision. And these are the sort of very high-level contents. I don't have a command yet for this. Oh, it doesn't let me paste in here? Hopefully I can get it. Oh, it just messes with the keyboard shortcuts in OBS. Okay, so now you know what we're working on today. Let's make it happen. Maybe minimize this one. Okay, so Zoo Server Standalone is the simple one, and then Zebra Server is the multi-tenant one, which is complicated and crazy. So how do I dev Zoo? Is there an easy way to dev on Zoo? I'd like to just have a single line command to run. Oh, okay, so dev on Zebra. It's a little bit confusing, these code names, but Zebra is basically the production service that is like a multi-tenant application. So I'll just run dev zebra instead of dev. Yarn dev : zebra. Ooh, we got different animals in our zoo. This is one of them. Okay, so it says it's using the data directory at using this local dev data as the data directory, and this is going to be really relevant here for our backend stream to understand like what data is being saved and where, because we're going to be moving stuff around. Hang on, where did it say it was? It's in code Z. Oh, it's inside of Zebra Server. Okay, that kind of makes sense. So apps Zebra Server is going to have like a dev data directory. Oh boy, and here's like the actual data. Here, I'm going to open this in the Finder. And so this is the actual, I'm curious like how big this directory is. 0 kilobytes. I don't know if I believe that. 18 kilobytes, okay. So like not so much data so far, but that's because we're not doing anything interesting so far. New at coding. Asking a lot of questions. Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to answer questions. That's why I'm live streaming. I want to engage, want to get people onboarded with this sort of thing. But yeah, this project is also like a little crazy complicated. But yeah, I hope that these tools will eventually be reusable in your own applications. These like tools that I'm referring to, like Zed, which is this API system where you can expose your API over the server. I'm going to turn the audio back on because there's a new song coming here. All this music is improvised live that you're hearing, so let me know if it's a total distraction to you. I can turn it off. No big deal. And the people on the VOD just have no idea what we're talking about here. Okay, so there's several different directories. There's docs, blocks, trash, custom store underscore store cache. Okay, that makes sense. What am I using to code your thingy? Well, I'm using a bunch of open source technology and a few like things that are a little less open source, like VS Code. So I'm in VS Code here, and then I'm also jumping back and forth to my terminal, and that's kind of where I'm going to be most of the time. Just like saving files on the file system. It's not built on an official like database or anything. Like it is its own simplified database that we're going to be seeing a little bit more of today compared to the other streams that are a little bit more front-end focused, where we're working on the GUI app. All right, so let's see if I can log in. So DevZoo should also open the front end. Does it open the front end? No, I guess DevZebra does not open the front end. So I'm gonna like have, oh wait, no, it did, right here. Localhost 3000. So I'll double click on this by holding like command double click. Opens up in VS Codium. And we have a bug right away. It's trying to access like the wrong port here. So I think there's a configuration in the way that we have this set up. So I need to specify the Z origin, basically, which tells the Zoo server, which is the Next.js front-end web experience. I need to specify which port to use. So 3988 was the port for Aardvark, I think, but 3888 is the Zebra backend server. Okay, so I'm just going to close this, and it's quitting both of these things at once. I'll rerun it. And here you can see a little bit about the commands that are actually running with Yarn. Y is just a shortcut for Yarn. I'm just using like Yarn 1, like the normal installation of Yarn. And it sets the environment variable and then runs two things at once. And it runs Yarn workspace. Basically, it starts the Zebra server and it starts the Zoo web front end. No, it starts the Zebra web front end, actually. So there's a different web front end for this as well. So I'm confusing myself, which is fine because it's been a minute. And yeah, we're working on like a different application than usual because this is the production application in theory. Like the multi-tenant application that should allow several people to jump into my service and create their own store to manage their application data, like in the CMS. And it still is like looking for 3988, even though I did dev zebra. So I'm going to search my code base for 3988. Maybe we've got that hard-coded in some bad place. In Zebra Web, yeah, it seems pretty hard-coded here. So I'm going to compare this server. We're on the Zebra Web. I'm going to compare this to Zoo Web. What is going on? What file am I in? I'm in apps, the Zebra app, /ZERVE, /aardvark dev. Okay, so this is kind of crazy what I have going, because I was using this front end to actually test the product itself. And I'm not sure if this is really the best thing to do, because this is basically an auto-generated file on ZERVE sync. And oh man, I love this music. I'm loving this improv music. Top secret improv stream, but it's really distracting me. So I'm gonna pause it. I'm gonna jump into like some lo-fi stuff on YouTube. Just gonna switch back to my normal lo-fi. YouTube knows that I'm just like ready for lo-fi girl here. So this will be a little bit more chill, I think. All right. Okay. So here we've got this hard-coded, and the reason this is hard-coded at localhost is because we have a package.json. So this is kind of confusing because I've got the local, and there's like a bunch of package.jsons in this repo. Package.json. There's one for ZooWeb, which is, we want the one for Zebra Web. So Zebra package.json. And there's the server side and the Next.js website. And here, this is like the actual way that the app gets used, or that the ZERVE product gets used. It calls ZERVE sync, and then this gets referred to. So maybe just the easiest thing to do for now, in order to move forward on this, is to just start up the aardvark server. So dev aardvark. That'll hopefully launch the aardvark server so that at least the web front end will be a little less crashy feeling. Okay. And it's also probably running, so if we do dev aardvark, it starts up, next is like notice that 3000 is unavailable, so it's launched the aardvark server on 3001. And this is like a different kind of server. Custom store. Now I think we're supposed to log in. So we're going to be doing a bunch of login junk today. And here, let's see if I can log in locally. The aardvark server is like the internal server that like no one's really supposed to use publicly. And it looks like I've not configured my own auth correctly. Email auth strategy not configured. Lovely. And now I'm not even working on the main server that I was hoping to work on. I'm working on aardvark server. So this is where email auth strategy gets used, but what does this mean, not configured correctly? There's no options passed in. Why would options be mandatory? It says here the options are optional. And we're trying to validate the address. But also for aardvark server, there should be options. Create email auth strategy. We were just there. I don't know why command clicking is not working. Create email auth strategy. Pass in email. Pass in options. I'm going to delete that to basically indicate that options is mandatory, but we are passing in the options. That's what's so funny here. So, like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to do console.log, yo, and say these are the options. And yo undefined. This is on Zebra, but on here, okay, so maybe what's happening is because we're running basically 4 different programs now. We're running like the backend that's private, internal to ZERVE, which is aardvark server, the web front end for aardvark. We're running Zebra, which is the production service that anyone should be able to use, that is then talking to the aardvark service, or it should be. So this error that we experienced did not seem to be in the right place. Oops. Localhost 3001 auth. I'm going to look at the lovely console here. Maybe I'll position it so that we can actually see it. Close U. We're in the network tab. I'm going to refresh. We're on 3001. Tap on email, type anything. We should see the error, but I'm trying to see which URL it's talking to here. Okay, it's really hard to see. It did a post to 3988. Which one was 3988? 3988 should be the aardvark server, according to this. So let me look at aardvark server. Maybe it'll say the port. It should be using the default port. And it is. So I'm a little confused. Oh, here it's saying that A is not allowed. That's a very useful error. That's not the same error. And it is going to the correct backend now. It's a pretty dry start to the stream. Not a big deal, though. Options. Here we've got a big old type error because TypeScript is just choking on all this fun stuff that we're having to think about. That's obnoxious. So let me just try again. Maybe it'll work if I try again. One can always dream. Like eric@zerve.app. Send a code. Okay, I don't know what I did differently, but hopefully I get this code into my email. Alright, I knew that the code would work. I knew that this would work because there was no error. Usually if it fails, there's an error that shows up in the GUI. It's just not a very nice error. NMB. Okay, so now I'm logged in on the aardvark server, and the aardvark server has access to the ZERVE store, which has this boolean for allow new users, which was really just a test. But like anyways, if I turn off allow new users and hit save, and then come over here and refresh, the front end says basically, oh, you're not allowed to have new users. But anyway, Zebra Web should have like a similar GUI. We want it to like have a similar behavior, so I think I've turned that off. I don't know what was wrong here before in my environment, but I think I've just gotten myself confused. So in Zebra Web pages, there's a few different things. There's FAQ page. This is a better example than what we have going on the home screen, where we've kind of deleted the behavior that we want to have. So I'm going to copy pages index because we're in like dev mode now. We don't care about the Zebra server looking good. I'm just going to copy this whole thing. We'll come back to the actual experience later on when we have something. It's kind of crazy that the production service depends on ZERVE itself but refers to the other service. I'm actually going to undo that. I'm going to undo it right now because it's too confusing. If it confuses me, it's going to confuse everybody. So I delete the generated directory. I come over here, I delete this ZERVE sync thing, which is awesome, is an important part of the experience if you look at the developer workflow doc on the docs page. You would understand kind of what that is doing or what it's supposed to be doing. But it auto-generates this directory that I just deleted. So now I shouldn't need the aardvark server in order to run the Zebra server. They should both be standalone. As much as I'd love to use my own product in the product, like that's a little meta, even for me. I love going meta, but can't go overboard with it. So I'm closing off the aardvark dev experience, and I'm still on Zebra. And now everything's crashing, everything's broken. But I'm just going to do a refresh because I think maybe it got a little bit confused. Oh, why is it taking so long to load? This is oh, it's because it's it was just taking a minute to load because Webpack was busy compiling the application. So this is the main product. I don't know why we want to have store state and custom store here. I think this is only exposed here as like a demo behavior. So this is the main server we're looking at here. So custom store, I'm just going to get rid of, and store state, get user store. Okay, store state I think is going to be really important. Because store state is basically how people will access public users' content. So there's no GUI for store state. That's really not ideal. But if I happen to know what a user ID is, we could go into here. So the problem is I don't know what the user ID is. So for our example, I think we just need to charge forward on this. So we'll log in, and here we're getting the error again, it seems. Email auth strategy not configured. So this was an issue on the ZERVE server. And here, at least now, the type safety is like complaining because options was mandatory, but options shouldn't be mandatory. I'm just going to change the implementation here of the email validation so that it doesn't throw this error. And one way I can do that is by saying that basically, because these should be already nullable. If I look at the type of options here, both of these email allow list and domain allow list are not mandatory. So I'm going to delete this error about options. And I just need to acknowledge that options might be null. So our options might be missing. So now maybe we'll have a working. Okay, good. So it's able to send me the code over email. It's not a very fancy email. It's a very simplified email. Hello, come on. Don't have all day. I'm trying not to say mean things about my email provider. NPD 513. Okay, so it says welcome and set username. Okay, so this is my current username. It's an ugly username. So I'm trying not to get distracted by the front end because it should like detect that I have a bad username and be encouraging me to set a real username. But I will just use the GUI here to set this username as EV. Okay, now it says welcome EV. Now let's make sure that like the actual data has changed properly in the back end. So we're in dev data in the correct section. So users EV. Okay, good. And it has probably one session. Yeah, I only have one session right now. And this is metadata about my user. And so that's authentication. I'm able to log in. I've got this username. Now here's one store that's basically a hard-coded store, foobar. This is working a little better than I thought even. Okay, I'm able to create a document and to edit the schema of this thing and say that, hey, this is like a list of text strings basically. So I'll hit save on this, come back, oh, and it's foobar, and I can add some strings. Hello, world. The accessibility leaves a little bit to be desired because it focuses like 3 things between each thing. I want to just be able to tab between them. Anyways, I hit save. And now from the API, we should be able to access EV's data. So .z, what was it called? User data or something? It'd be interesting if this .z actually provided a better name to get the user's data. But I don't know if that's practical. I don't think that's worthwhile changing. It's just that the URLs that we expose to the user are going to be a little bit less than ideal. But here we refer to it as store state. I'll just refer to it as U, because it's going to basically refer to the user's data. but it's only referring to a single store. So if I go here, basically it's going to be like, oh, okay, oh, hang on. I need to refer to the right host because in production these will be on the same host together, but now I'm referring to this. And I can refer to the .type, which is like metadata about what's going on here, but it doesn't really matter because there's u/ev, which is my user, and that's what's going on here. It's basically getting the data from my store, and now it's got hello world. Oh, and let me bring this so that maybe you can see where what I'm typing in here. Okay. Okay, so every user has their own hard-coded single store right now, but I'd like to make it so that every user can create several different stores, and then eventually maybe we'll have orgs. I'd love to make it so that there can be a group of users who can collaborate on one store, because that's kind of the main workflow, is that you've got like one engineer who's setting up the store, setting up the schema, and then you've got non-technical people who can log into the same store and modify the data there. So I need to support that workflow pretty desperately. So first I'll make it so that one user can set up many different stores. So there's a function called getUserStore, which basically just has the ID of the user. So we should probably make it so that getUserStore provides the ID of the user ID. Oops, let me just rename it with the hotkey. Wow, VS Code is really choking on this file. Like I want to just be able to rename this variable that's local to this function, and VS Code is like, oh, I can't figure out how to select all of these references to ID. So it's like, whatever, I'll just do it from a text-based user ID. And now I'll also say store key. And I probably don't want to make it so that this is done automatically, in case that maybe the store doesn't exist. So get user zeds. This is where you sort of are getting the content for the user. And you spread in the behavior here. I don't like that that's a thing, but in any case, I'll do another spread, which is like get user zeds that I'm going to define in this module. So because of that, I'm just going to kind of delete all of this and just define get user zeds out here. Oh, it's just a function, I think. No, it is an async function. Nice. That'll come in handy. And it's given user metadata. And it basically returns an object of any z. Record is a string association to any z. Maybe we can auto-import any z. No, all of my editor features are not working today, so any z can come from here. Any z, I believe, is what it's called. Oops. Yeah, it's called any z. And this is our own little in-house abstraction. Okay, so this is probably really confusing to anyone who's not familiar with this code base because we're so deep in it, but it's not, at least as long as I understand, it's okay. So what are we going to have? We're going to have like a bunch of different actions that are kind of custom to the user. So one action, for example, is create store. So let's say const create store is a create z action. And And again, auto import's not going to work. So I'm just, oh, create Z action is already here, but I don't think I referred to it correctly. No, I did. Okay, so we create Z action and we tell it what payload we are going to request. We're going to request basically a string. Like we should maybe do something a little bit more complicated, but for now, I'll just say string schema. Oh, thank you for auto-completing that. And then we're going to return null schema. Can you auto-complete that? Maybe, maybe not. And then now we define the actual behavior. Store name string, and we return null. So I'll do a console.log, create the store, and pass store name to make sure that all the plumbing is working. So we're going to demo this in the GUI now. Okay, so there's no longer the hard-coded user store. So what does the GUI give for us now here? Okay, there is this action, this new action that we created called create store. And so we'll say, this is my project, like my project. Oh yeah, we need to have some schema that specifies that this is a slug, basically. So yeah, I should write a JSON schema that's a reusable slug schema. Okay, so if I submit this, we probably get a log statement that says create this store with a string passed through it. So the plumbing is all working. That's nice when it works on the first try. And what does it mean to actually create the store? Well, that is the big question, isn't it? So in addition to the auth data, we're going to have data that's just user data. User data /ev. Okay, so inside of user data, okay, so basically get user store is something we're going to basically kill here. So I'm going to comment it out because there's some stuff in here that we want to reuse probably. And then I'll undo this as well. So this is just like return, I don't know, null. This is not going to work. This is going to cause bad things to happen. Because null is not a valid Z thing. But anyways, we need to walk before we can run here. So create the store. We want to basically like make sure that that directory exists, and if that directory exists, that's going to mean that the user has the store. On the account. So we're using the file system to basically make sure the user doesn't create two stores at once. So let's see, maybe we can do a file system.create directory. I mean, it's a little bit lower level than usually we would be doing here in our main file, but it's fine. So do we have makedir? We want makedir. But basically we're going to join the data directory with user data and the user ID. And I'm going to abstract this into its little helper function because I want the code to be a little bit more readable and resilient feeling than having to construct paths manually. So const or function get user dir. User ID is a string, and it's going to return a string of the path basically. So return this. Okay, great. And we'll create another one called function get user store dir, where you pass in the user ID, and which is a string, of course. You pass in the store ID string, and it returns a string. So we combine these functions here. So now we know the directory. So const new store path equals get user store dir, pass in the user ID and the store name. And we're going to do a make dir of new store path. And hopefully that'll throw an error if the store already exists. And then once that directory exists, even though we haven't done anything with it, like I think that's basically all we need to do to indicate to our backend state that there is a new thing here. Parameter user implicitly has any type. Okay, wow, this is the most useless TypeScript error that I've seen in my life. So I'm just going to import. Oh, they're system files. I wonder if I should use this abstraction. No, there's not really a make dir abstraction here, so I will just go ahead and do the slightly janky thing, because we're here to get work done. We're not here to be super proud about our code. Make dir p, which basically says recursively make this directory if it doesn't already exist. And we're already confident that the user ID should exist here, and if it's not, no big deal. So we're going to await make dir p with a new store path. Then hopefully it'll throw an error if this store already exists. But let's see. I'm going to delete the store cache here because I don't think there's anything that. I think that's just an artifact from before. Now on the front end, I will create my project, and my project's directory gets created. Now if I try again, I want to see an error. And there's no error. So make dir p will happily just like move on. So I want there to be an error if you're trying to make this store twice. So I will say if await exists, the new store path, and we'll import exists from fsextra as well. Then we'll throw a new error. I've got my own sort of error type here. In fact, this is like a request error, I guess. Yeah, it's a request error because it's basically the user's fault. Okay. I don't remember how to import this error. Oh, it probably comes from core. Yeah, it does. So the request error is given an error code, which is like already exists, which is like a short string that tells the user what's going on that they can check against. A message saying, a human readable message basically, the store yeah, this is already for a user who's logged in. And then we provide the details, which is like store name. Okay. So now we should get an error. Maybe. I'm not sure if the error is actually happening. It's possible that there is an error going on that we're just not seeing. Yeah, so the error is not being surfaced to the user here. But create store, it says there's a bad request. And if we look at the data here, it's saying exactly what's going on. The store already exists. Okay, bad news. That's the error that we just created. And because we're working on the front end today, or the back end, like I don't really want to spend time surfacing this error, but we really should. So maybe we can get that quickly fixed. So here there's a Z node, which is basically handling the entire front end, and inside of it is the Z action node. So this is where the bug is. It's an async button. Oh, okay, so I think the problem is that the async button is not overriding the right behavior, because it's so ugly what happens when errors happen. Like, it does not look like anything useful. I wonder if async button has... Oh man, my editor is so broken, it's driving me crazy. I need to go and fix like a bunch of TypeScript errors so that I can navigate around my code base better. Anyways, there's this thing, and I just want to make sure that there's an on error. But basically, it's like trying to open the error using this global navigation, probably. But we can also show the error that's happening here in the GUI. I promised I wouldn't work on the front end, but here I am. Okay, TypeScript is really choking. It's not being useful here, but we should now be getting the on error prop here that we can use. So we'll just do set error, which will be a new state that we keep here in the Z action. And then when we press go, we want to clear the error. So set error. And we'll specify the type here of our error state as either null or a generic error. And the other errors all extend the generic error. So that should be fine. And then it's saying, hey, you're not using the error. Good feedback, good feedback. I don't think we have a nice abstraction for error text right now. We want like a little error box to show up. Error.message, probably. Here it's unable to reference generic error, I guess. But that's like that's a fixable thing. Okay, so now if we do something, what was it called? My project. We want the error to show up. And it's not showing up. The error is still coming from the back end, so some of this plumbing that we just wrote is not working so well. I'll throw a debugger statement in here. And what should happen, okay, we didn't get to that debugger statement. So I think maybe the error here is inside of the async button. Let's see if we can be caught here. It seems unlikely that this would be happening at this point. So on press is the logic here. Let's just do a sanity check. Hello. And we'll see our logs. I could swear we're using this async button. I swear it. I swears it. See, it's async button. And we're importing it. I mean, are there multiple async buttons? No, there's the only one implementation of async button. So it's got me wondering, what am I doing wrong? Like, what level of abstraction is going poorly here? Render async button. Render it. Okay, so at least the render async button is happening. On press, console.log. On press. Okay, the on press is happening. Huh? Maybe there's not an error happening from the perspective of the callback. No, we don't see, we don't get to huh. Let's do console.log final question mark, and then here we would do console.log Maybe we are getting to this error state. Yeah, we are. So it reaches If it reaches then what gives is the real question. Maybe we're experiencing error. I'm probably ignoring some important log statements here. Like show error toast maybe is having a bad time. Because also, like we're not seeing this error pop up in the error toast. So I'll just like comment out this thing, because set error is the next thing that would happen. It's set error? On catch, wait. It's on catch versus on error? I'm so confused. Maybe there are multiple async buttons. Didn't I just add on error to an async button? What am I doing? I'm so confused. Or maybe it's just called on catch, but no, this thing already existed in the code base. Okay, whatever. I don't know what I did wrong. Oh, there's a bunch of async buttons in this file. So let's just rename this to onCatch. And everything will be better now. I do this. Okay, we reached the debugger statement. That's nice. I'll just hit play. I need to find the play button. Here we go. And now I'll try again, my project. Failed to construct text. Okay, good. And by good, I mean not good, but like, hey, it could be worse. So why can't you use text? We're in a TSX file. Have we imported? Okay, let's just call it paragraph, because paragraph is real text. Maybe text has not been imported. Yeah, text wasn't imported. Now at least the error should show up when it happens client side. It's still super ugly, but hey. It's properly complaining. So now we want to be able to come back and see what the user's stores are, now that we've got a create store function that's kind of working as we intended. What's going wrong with this? What do you mean? The parameters for this callback are not consistent with other Node.js callbacks. But I'm using fs extra. What's funny is it works. I think that they've just renamed it to path exists. Because they don't want to make API incompatible changes, which is fine. Okay, so now at least TypeScript is showing up for us eventually. We can create a new store called foo. It doesn't complain. It should succeed and do something else. But now if I create foo again, it says, oh, the store foo already exists. Great. So now we want to be able to list our stores and tap into them. So for get user zeds, in addition to create store, we'll have const stores. Oh, let's capitalize create store for consistency. And then stores itself will be create z group. I forgot the signature for z group, but that's what it is. It's a group. It's like a set of things that are all named, that are all going to have the same behavior, basically. So all we need to do is provide the callback for getChild. But then there's also create zgettable group. And this is what we really want, I think, where you can actually list what the children are. And there's not even a front end for create zgettable group, so maybe we'll get distracted with more front end code, but it's fine because it's going to unblock us from a lot of back end productivity. I'm going to clean up some of the mess that I left here inside of my button code. We need to clean up the error handling as well, on like the visual error handling, but also the logical error handling. Like, it's trying to show the errors in so many different ways, and none of them are very appealing right now. But we can do that later on when we're working on the front end aesthetics of everything. Okay, so create zgettable group, and we provide 2 callbacks. And what were those callbacks again? I have like a short-term memory loss. GetChild, and then get children list options. I see. Okay. And none of the options there are required. So get gets get options, and getChild gets the key string. And both of them are async functions. Okay. So this is the key string. Now we want to return the actual store, basically. And then here we want to have an async function that says the get options, which is like children list options. Hopefully we can import children list options from Z when TypeScript wakes up for the day. And then we return a children list. And a children list looks like this. It has children, a boolean of whether or not there's more, and a cursor. And they're all required, even the cursor? Okay, fine. Whatever. Return children. More is false, and the cursor, I'll just have it as an empty string, because that's a string. So the children is going to be basically listing the contents of the get user dir. Maybe get user dir should have other content aside from the user. So we'll have stores. And then what we'll do is we'll say const user store path is something like this. And then we'll do a read dir of the user store path to list all the children's stores. And this is probably not going to work on the front end, but hey, we can fix that. Ooh, bad things are happening. Okay, I'm just going to refresh and see what happens. Oh, this is not looking good. Probably we're having some backend error right now, so I'll just see what that backend error is by manually going into it, maybe? No, because we're logged in, it's not super easy for me to even debug it here, so I will look at the network requests. Oh, that's a lot of errors. That's not just like one error. They just keep coming. And it's a 500 error, which indicates that something's create Z gettable group is not defined. Okay, that's something I can fix. Now what happens? Okay, so it shows at least the group is being listed. First time chatter, enemy so you say, it's like watching your inner voice while coding in human form. Yeah, that's pretty much live streaming. Oh, I guess your chat has already disappeared, but yeah, it's a matter of verbalizing all of my crazy thoughts and crazy abstractions. It helps me understand like how absurd they are, trying to imagine them from somebody who's coming and watching for the first time, because it's like we're deep in like several layers of abstraction here. But yeah, we're trying to just build a content management system, using some nice code, some code that at least I can appreciate. And if other people don't appreciate it, then hey, maybe they will appreciate the actual product. Earlier on in the stream, I was sharing the URL of the docs that I'm working on, which I had not posted about very publicly because they're still highly under construction. But maybe I can get this copied over into chat again, so you can see a little bit more about like what it is that I'm hoping to build here. So now we're trying to do scan directory, but the list of stores does not exist. So basically, there should be like a try statement around this. Read dir. Because basically, if there are no stores, then we basically just want to return none. So what I'll do is I'll just say let children as an empty array. We'll try, and then we'll see to make sure that the error is the sort of error that we're expecting. e.code equals no.noent. e.code, if it doesn't equal enoent entity, basically saying if it's not this exact error, then throw this error. Otherwise, we're going to ignore the error, basically, because we actually don't care. You just don't have any stores yet. And that's the case for me because I just changed the structure of how stores are saved. So if I refresh now, we're not getting errors from the server. It's just that the front end does not know how to display an empty gettable group. So we're going to go back into ZNode group. So there's group, and then there's gettable. I think we're on the Z group node, but I will just check here. Yeah, it is a Z type set to group, but there's also this other metadata here, which is like what is like the value that you can get. So it's something that you can get, but you can also get a child of. So this is part of the crazy Z abstraction that hopefully will be usable for backend developers in the future outside of ZERVE, but right now is a little raw for that and a little undocumented and a little bit unusable, which is fine. Because there's a long-term vision and a short-term vision. And also here we need to actually like expose the store. But, well, for now let's just get it so that listing makes a little bit more sense. So Z group node. Does this have any implementation inside of it? Does this return anything? Okay, so I guess it does try to query and will render buttons for the children. So maybe we'll just have, like, if there's no child names, then we're going to render a paragraph that says nothing here. Otherwise, you don't need to render that because, okay, good. So this is functioning. Oh, the docs look clean and nice. Yeah, it's using Docusaurus actually. So Docusaurus is a project that I was involved in the genesis of when I was on the open source team at Facebook. And now they're on version 2, and it has like a new owner, a new lead maintainer. And they finally released Docusaurus 2 just a few days ago. It allows me to move really quickly. Basically, all I have to do is edit my code base of markdown files, and it shows up. And then I just like commit to the code base, or I publish to GitHub, and then I think it's on Netlify, or forget which service. No, I think it's on render.com. Render will rebuild and publish the docs, so it's really nice. What's powerful about Docusaurus is not just that it's like so easy to get up and running, but there's a really in-depth customization workflow, and it also supports things like MDX, which allows you to drop into write React components inside of your Markdown files. So if you rename your .md file to a .mdx file, you can literally start writing JavaScript and React components in your documentation, and that's how a lot of the sort of advanced docs are built when you have sort of interesting features showing up inside of your documentation. And of course, the Docusaurus website here is built in Docusaurus naturally. So I'm glad that they look nice. I'm mostly worried about the content, and yeah, there's not too much content yet, but the content that is there, I'm starting to be a little bit more proud of. Okay, so we'll create a store. Be like foo, or no, I'll call it test. some really creative name, I'm sure. Now I tap into stores. It exists. Okay, so now I don't even want to click this because I know bad things will happen if I do. Because on Zebra server, this callback where it should be returning a Z child, like for now I'll just say like return Z static, create Z static, lol. I don't know if create Z static is imported. But yeah, if you want to dive in, a lot of the stuff that I'm working on, like this Z framework, is documented there. It's under-documented. So like z.md, it's just the markdown file where I'm trying to document these things, but they're kind of not, they're not here yet, really. So like Z group, I'll just write down the ones that I've been adding that I've been using, because there's a bunch of Z things that are even more experimental than this. Z gettable group and Z static. So yeah, if you want to like help with some of the documentation, you can read and experiment and understand what's actually going on with these different Z modules and try drafting up some documentation. Right now I'm just sticking it all into one file because there's a kind of internal documentation. Eventually it would be great to publish the Z toolkit as a standalone system that people can use. I think there'd be a lot of power in that, but for now, yeah, just staying focused. And yeah, if I tap on test now, it says lol, and it's a string. Okay, so that's what create Z static does. It just like exposes a piece of data statically. Okay, it's not strictly static because you can define the Z dynamically. So we can pass in, for example, store ID. Oh, maybe there's an error here. I'm just going to reload. Yeah, the store ID, that's test. Lovely. Everything's working so great. But we want this to be the actual store. And I commented out some stuff that I was actually creating the store earlier. And I see there's even a local cache of stores that we were using. And maybe we can continue using that, but we just need to make it sure that we're referring to the full namespace of the store. So how might we do that? Let's just change this get user store function to be more real. We'll keep the get user store function here. And that's what this will be actually. We'll return get user store. It's an async function, so we'll return like await get user store. It doesn't really matter if we await it because we're already inside of the async function, but no big deal. It's more explicit this way. So we pass the user ID, which is available here in our scope, and we'll pass the store ID. And the thing with get user store, we want to make sure that the store literally exists before we get it. So get user store. So we'll have const internal store path, which will literally just be a path.join. Well, it's not even going to be a path.join because that's a cross-platform thing that's meant to like support Windows. I don't know why you would ever run this thing on Windows. Like, I really don't recommend it. But here, we're going to create our own path format, basically. User ID / store ID. And that's the internal store path. And then now when we refer to our store's object, we'll do this. So basically, if we've already created the store, we want to reuse it and not reproduce it on the server. Like, creating a general store here is a pretty heavy thing because of what's going on inside of this function. It'll take a certain amount of memory, and we want it so that if several people are accessing the same store, it's accessed this way. So at this point, we do want to make sure the store literally exists before we move on. So maybe I will refactor out this store existing logic, which is right here. So I'll just do that. I will create a new function out here somewhere. It's fine to define it inside of our server here. So get user store and does store exist? Does user store exist? User ID, store. It's the store ID, but also the store name. It's kind of ambiguous here how it's both. And we're not going to throw in this case. So I'll copy this, but then we're going to say, we're just going to do return path exists. And then we want to use does get user store exist in the places where we want to use it. So if await does user store exist with the user ID and the store ID, then we'll throw the error. And we don't need this new store path. Well, we do, but we can just do it down here, I guess, because it's fine. It's just a slight change. So same thing here, where it's like, if, oh here, I'm just going to copy the same exact logic. And also, why is it called store key? This is store ID. Maybe it's not the full ID, but it is the store ID. Because it's the ID within a certain user. Anyways, I'm going to copy this check here and say, hey, you're only allowed to get stores that actually exist. Okay, okay. And then we're going to cache the store and create the new store, basically. So create system files. We're going to basically be joining the store path. Not the internal store path, but we're going to want to, what was it called? Get user store path or something like that. User ID, store ID. That seems right. And then we want to have a identifier for the store. What is this? Create general store. It's called the doc name. Okay, because it's basically sharing a database. And maybe it should have its own database. I do kind of want it to have its own database. So out here where we define create core data, we don't necessarily want to share this across the whole application. We want every user to kind of have their own data domain or whatever. So I will go ahead and do this where the user store path will be here, and I'll just copy this. So there's the store cache, and then there's the data. So yeah, we're kind of creating our own custom file system setup here. Is this script on spreadsheet Google? First time viewer Julian. I don't really know what you mean by is this script on spreadsheet Google. This is a bunch of code that I'm writing on GitHub for my open source project ZERVE. I'll call this store data, and then I'll pass this in to create general store. So create general store, could theoretically be sharing one database or one data system with other environments. No big deal, though. I kind of like it this way, where there's going to be one directory in the file system for each user store. Okay, and I clearly didn't remember the name of this function. Get user store dir instead of get user store path. Whatever, dude. Okay. I don't know, maybe this will work now. If I refresh, I want this to be an actual store. It's not looking good though. The test store already exists. Wait, why am I checking to see if the store... Oh, wait, no, if the store doesn't exist, then you say, this would just be a not found error, actually. So we don't need to do anything crazy, just like not found error. And I think maybe there's defaults to not found error, but we also we can just say, I provide useful errors. I try to provide useful errors. Okay, so if I refresh, this is a store. So I don't know if it's created the store properly. I kind of assume it has, and we'll check it in the file system in a second. But if I go to a store that doesn't exist, okay, well, I think it's just not displaying the 404 on the front end. But if I look at the network tab, it says the store does not exist. The store ev/food does not exist. That's my username / the store ID. This is nice. So now in theory, several users can log into this and they can create several stores and access those stores. Oh jeez, I should have gotten more sleep last night. I don't really care about this 404 error not showing up test. Okay, so auth/user. It's a little bit unintuitive that I'm at auth/user instead of being at my actual username. And here it doesn't even show me my username right now. I don't know why. Why not? That seems to be a bug in the auth front end. Because if we look at the network request for this module, or for this, like the API basically, we query for user. If we query for the dot type of the user, it knows that it's an auth container. So it is indicating to the front end that this should be an auth container, but it's just showing up like as a normal container. Anyways, like this is not too buggy. Great. I create a store called Great, and you kind of have to assume that it works. Create store, Great, and I click submit, and I go back and I tap on stores, and Great is here, and this is a new store. Now let's go check to make sure that our stores have been created in the file system properly. I'm going to delete these two things because these were old artifacts of the previous code base that was running. Now if I tap on stores, here's the two stores. Each store has its own database, basically its own data abstraction, and a cache which is used to that's kind of interesting. Yeah, that the cache is not behaving in the way that I expected it to. But anyways, the two stores are being created. It creates a test and Great. These are our stores, and they're all inside of my user directory. So the question is, how ambitious do I get from here? Should I move on to organizations? I kind of want to, because like I said earlier, organizations are such a key part of what we're trying to do here. And for user stores, well, maybe we should provide settings first on what a store actually can be, because the store, maybe you want to be able to change like the label or the aesthetic or the configuration of the store. For example, you might want to make it actually private. Maybe you want to have some amount of data that's public in the store and some amount of data that's private. But for now, I'm just going to, I think I'm going to work on orgs because organizations are so important for this project to make any sense. Oh, and before I move on, actually, I need to make it so that you can query for a store. So, what happens if a group has a path, has a slash in it? Is that allowed? I wonder, but currently we have a broken behavior where we want to be able to access the store from the outside for someone who's not logged in. Like this API, for example, is not logged in. I want to be able to access /u or /store. Yeah, let's just call it store instead of u. Maybe I should switch to lowercase everything. Or camel case maybe. Anyways, I'll just call it store with a capital S to be consistent with my previous mistakes. Staying consistent to your previous mistakes is an ongoing theme, probably. That's how I got into this mess. So get user store. So there's a user ID and like the thing is there's just one input coming in, which is like a string. So for example, if I do store ev/great. It says not found in container, but it's only looking at the path term called ev, which is sensible. Okay, I'm just going to do the risky thing here, which is make it so that you're basically returning another group at all times. And I'll do return create zstatic, because this is just like a placeholder basically. And just for the sake of testing, I'll say that user ID and the store ID. So the store ID is the second argument. So we're nesting groups here, and they're not gettable groups because you don't really want to be able to list from the public perspective. You don't want to list what are these stores that people have created. By the way, these are strings. Maybe, I don't know if that will make TypeScript happier or sadder, but now if I query for this, it says, oh, okay, this is the name of your store, ev/great. And we already have all the code, I think, necessary to do this junk. Right? Oh man, I just realized something. I'll explain what I realized in a minute when I have to fix it, or I have to deal with my mistake. But first, I need to just do get user store, and I suppose this is an async function, yeah, because it needs to might take a second to either create the store. It won't be creating it because this code path would basically check to see if it doesn't exist, but it might need to create it in memory. So that's why it checks to see if the folder exists, because maybe nobody has accessed the store in a while. So this create general store has not actually been created, even though the files exist locally, which is fine. Await get user store is an async function already. Get user store takes the user ID and the store ID. And now we have access to the store. We could just return the store, but we don't want to give the user access to the full store. So we're going to return store.z.state, which is the read-only state that it's considered a zgettable or a zgettable group. So now if I query for this, cannot read properties of undefined reading z. So why is get user store? This should either be throwing an error or it should be like it shouldn't be undefined. Oh wait, look at the bottom. Look at this code here. This code is whack. It returns stores, but it should be returning stores internal store path. And also, by the way, this is can just be renamed to store. The internal abstractions are a little bit ridiculous and messy, and the way that I'm using them here, they feel extremely overcomplicated because it feels like I've changed some design decisions about how this data, like at one point, was reused across the application, and now it's basically created inside of a directory for each user, but whatever. I think that'll maybe fix this issue. Okay, good. So this is the empty store. This looks like an empty store. And we're on stores/great. And we're just like able to get this content, but we're not able to change it from the public perspective. So now I'm going to create a new file, like is ZERVE good. I'll create this file. I'll set the schema of this bad boy to be a switch. By default, it's false because it's not ZERVE is not good by default. But once we do some work here, so I'll refresh the store, and it's saying basically, oh, is ZERVE good is a Boolean, and the value is false because it's not good yet. But then we come over here and we make ZERVE good. Who knew that it was this easy? We save it and we come over here and the value is changed to true. Awesome. Okay, so we have a functioning setup. So I will try to also rename my user because when when the username changes, like really terrible things are gonna happen. And we need to rethink what happens if the username changes because, whoopsie doopsies, the .ds store is showing up here when we're listing because this is like a Mac implementation detail. Gross, 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 gross. Reader. Oh gosh, so this is so silly. I'm just gonna filter out. Good luck creating a store that's called .ds_store. Oh man, your store would like just not exist from the perspective of the app. Like, talk about edge cases. Just don't call your store .ds_store. It's not gonna. You won't be able to hack ZERVE if you do. You just won't be able to use it either. That'll be a broken store. Okay, so we've got two stores. They have their own data. This is nice. This is really nice. Schemas, so we can create a schema. I don't know. Why am I doing this? Like QA answer, question answer. And question answer is a schema that's like an object that has multiple properties. We're on the web app, and the web app is super busted or super uggo and busted and confusing. So I don't really know why I'm tinkering around with this, but yeah, schemas are working fine. Not that I expected otherwise based on how everything else is kind of set up. Okay, but bad things will happen if I change my username, and because of the way that I've cached the internal stores, like, bad things will really happen. So there's this stores cache and an internal store path, and we're like, so like this is not good because if the user ID changes, we need to basically like go and replace all of these internally cached stores. Not good, not good, not good at all. So store, I'll rename this to be a little bit more explicit. Like these are the memory stores. User, or this memory stores. So like some bugs I can just kind of see coming because I know enough about the system, and this is one of those. I'm not even going to bother demonstrating the bug because I just know that this would be bad news. So it's going to be a record of records. Wow, that's so crazy. That's so meta, dude. So here in get user stores, maybe it's like get memory store or something. I'll move get user stores up to this spot in the code. Hello, hello, under memory stores. Because that way it's like clear when these things are like kind of logically co-located. Memory stores and get user store. Maybe I'll just rename it to get memory store. Because this is kind of explaining like why there needs to be this function is because it's caching internally to the memory. And now we're referring to something that doesn't exist. So memory stores. If memory stores look it up and to look at user ID, question mark dot store ID. So yeah, we're going to need to basically be handling the username change and be moving all of the cached stores at the time when the username changes when the user changes their name. So if it exists, basically, well here, let's say just const already in memory, the already in memory store is this one. And if there's an already in memory store, just use it. This is called memoization. So we return the memoized store. And then before we like go and like bring the store into memory, we need to make sure that it actually exists and that we're not like accidentally creating it during this process. And then here I'm just going to change the error, and we don't want this internal store path anymore. That was a bug. That was a design error. Okay, I'm just changing the grammar of this error. Okay, and then now we need to actually save it properly. So memory stores. Memory stores dot. Okay, so we might need to like create the record. So code, write code, Eric. Const user memory stores, and that's going to basically be the memory stores look up the user ID, and if this doesn't exist, we need to like go make this little cache exist. So basically it's going to get that record, or it's going to assign that record as a new object. So now user memory stores will exist, and we need to repeat that same pattern. At this point, we're pretty sure that it's not here, so we can just but we know that this is here, so we can say user memory stores store ID will equal our new cached store. We might as well be a little bit more explicit here. We'll say const new memory store. It's always nice to be explicit, because when other people come back and read this code, they're like going to be so confused about what's going on. And then we can return this new memory store. That's why we declared it. It's like now it's like really obvious what the shortcomings are of this system, is that, oh, like we need to keep every store in memory, basically. There are some trade-offs. Like there might be some pretty serious memory leaks, but that's why we're dealing with small amounts of JSON data for now. That's why we're focusing on the content management system use case and not encouraging you to do user data in the CMS just yet. So user ID implicitly has an any type. Okay. I think TypeScript is a little fucked up. Someone's been messing with TS. Okay, so I think the server will automatically restart as I make changes. So probably like we're okay. If I refresh, for example, we haven't moved any of the files around, the actual backend. So I'll create a new store called lol. And we need a better behavior when the action succeeds, because it does not look like the action succeeded, but it did. We created our new store, and we have different stores that have independent data. But when I set username, I think this is the official way to set the username. No, this is not the official way to set the username. Okay, fine. So I need to tweak this just a bit. Sorry, I need to do a nice good yawn first. Like, I did not give myself enough sleep last night. I have no one to blame but me. I woke up and I was like, I'm going to go back to sleep. But I didn't. And then I started drinking a big Red Bull on an empty stomach. So pretty soon I'm going to need to actually get some food into me. And I don't know if I'm going to wind down the stream for not, or if I'm just going to like rapidly eat off camera. Okay, so I tap into stores. Wait, no, I need to like get this front end fixed so that I can use the correct behavior for renaming my username, because the front end will get confused if I don't use this correct front end abstraction, because like when the username changes, it needs to save that username change on the front end. Otherwise, the front end basically logs itself out, which is a terrible experience. So that's why I'm not using the set username action that's here, because even though this works fine for setting the username on the back end, I need this like auth abstraction to actually work. Thanks. Okay, so Z node. We'll see. Like I'll find in this code where the bad stuff is happening. So Z auth node. I don't think this is working, right? I'll put in a debugger here. Hello, DevTools. Refresh. Do we reach the debugger statement? No, we do not. Yeah, well, that's exactly why I was concerned. What if I put a debugger statement here? Or I'll just put a log statement here for clarity. Container. And then we'll see here, we reach container. Now, what is the Z meta, type meta? So I'll just, the type meta is somehow not here on the container. Now, I'm going to see right now. Next step is to see, is this an issue on the back end or the front end? Like I could have broken either. But we're querying here, wait, it's an auth container. How is it that this used to work? Like at the beginning of the stream, we definitely had the real GUI for setting the username. So something happened there. So like this, there's the Z auth node. Okay, like I don't know whose fault this is. But I think I know how to fix it. If type name, wait, is it, I think I changed it on the back end. I'm not saying that it makes any sense on the front end, but auth, no, what was it? Where was it? The Zebra server. Maybe I broke it around here somewhere. I think I have one idea of what it could be. Otherwise, I'm like super freaking lost on this one. You spread in the ... user inside of the get user z's. And like, what does the create auth itself do? This is not a rhetorical question. Can someone please tell me? Create auth. It's going to return ... blah 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 blah. It's creating these internal actions for authentication stuffs, and then it says create Z meta container. So is it auth container or is it auth container contract meta? So this is the stuff that looks like it's working, maybe. .t is an auth container. So what the hell is an auth container enum? Maybe I should write some documentation on this so that I could read up on what the hell is going on. That's the real meta here. Like, go to z.markdown. It's just a bunch of stubs of different things that I should document. Like one day, z auth container and z auth node, basically. So I mean, like I know roughly what is happening here. So just to be more clear, if I query for auth inside of the API, I need to query, sorry, not query for this, because usually you query for the .type of something actually before you query for the thing itself. So it says it's a container with a given Z contract. Well, here, let me just, I'm going onto auth, and now we hit this debugger statement. So what was auth/user, I guess? That's part of the question, is that there's like a different sort of thing that's returned depending on whether or not you're logged in. Like, that makes perfect sense. That's very intentional. So I think part of the issue there was that I was just at the wrong URL. I think it was kind of a surface level bug that was actually just like a GUI bug. So I see I had 2 followers earlier, and now I've got 1 or 2 viewers. I don't worry too much about viewer count. I just laugh at myself. It's a good reason to laugh at myself. Okay, so this debugger that I just had implemented, this one is confusing. Okay, that's a useful bit of documentation, right? It's like I'm apparently confused here. Okay, so I don't need these log statements anymore because I think I know how to quote-unquote fix my issue, which is that before I was at auth/user, which is not something we even want to really expose, because this is like the underlying data. Like, the URL should probably not even be this. The URL is like, it's not even intuitive that the URL is like /auth, where this is like basically where your profile is. Usually, like, your profile is at a given URL. So that's why, one of the reasons why I've forked the zoo GUI, which is what you're seeing here. I forked it from the, or like, this is actually the Zebra GUI, the Zebra web experience, but I knew that like the actual user experience should not resemble this. This is not quite ideal for the users. So yeah, this is where the place where there's an actual like set username button. Okay, so I'm back to setting my username. So I'll change my username to Eric, and all sorts of bad stuff goes down. Bad stuff. Data is not defined. Yeah, this makes sense because there was a callback. The callback is handle user ID change, and we just reached that spot in our code. I'm sure it'll say. I'm sure it'll say, yeah, handle user ID change. It says the previous name and the new name. So basically what that's saying is that the auth system has successfully changed the username, and now it's up to us to deal with the change, the fact that the username has changed. It's kind of an edge case, but also like I think it's important for users to be able to change their name. Like, that's like a very relevant feature. And the way the auth system works is it allows you to log in just with an email address, and if you're logging in for the first time, it'll actually generate an auth ID for you, or a user ID for you. And then you can change it kind of at will. And it'll of course change the URL that your data is available at, but maybe that's something that you want to do. Okay, but anyways, it's trying to access something called data, and it's saying, oh, move these files around. Because this is back when we had one database, basically, for all the users. Way back at the beginning of the stream, 2 hours ago. So I'm just going to delete this, because now all we need to do is we need to move the user data around. And maybe it's not all we need to do, but that's all we need to do from the file system perspective. So now I'll go into user data, and it does. It has moved all of my data into Eric, whereas previously my username was EV. So good, 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 good. The problem now is that the memory stores are not going to be named correctly. So I'd like to plug in my phone before my phone is dead. Sorry for the ADD stream. but it's good. We added, made it so that every user can have multiple stores in the repo. Isn't that nice? In the back end. So basically, if the memory stores user ID is here, then we're going to take the user memory stores, assign that as this thing, and I said assign, that means use an equals sign. And that's the prev user ID. And then we're basically going to delete memory stores with the prev user ID and assign memory stores with a new user ID to equal the user memory stores. And that is how you rename a key inside of an object in JavaScript. Isn't that fun? It's not fun. I want there to be like some easy rename function. I want this to be more readable. But anyways, now I fixed that issue that I was complaining about earlier where I was like, oh crap, everything's gonna break when the user changes their name. We can't have that. I don't like how many like confusing type errors there are here, and TypeScript has been so slow and unresponsive. It like sometimes I can't tell what's a real issue and what's not. But here, this looks like a real issue. We can annotate this. Okay, so the question is, do I go eat lunch or do I go work on, oh wait a second, is this still an issue? Let me make sure that we actually have a working system. You're not authorized to view this. Please log out and log back in. Ugh. This is the problem that I was complaining about. It says welcome EV, it has the previous username. So all of that like pain that I was going through with the auth system, it didn't even like pan out. Okay, like I couldn't even log out because it's like everything's been renamed on the back end, so I'm going to basically delete my session from the front end. I'm going to log in again, eric@zerve.app. In theory, I could log in with my username, but I don't have a password set, so I can't log in with my username because it's a username and password deal. So now I check my email. And I wait for it to come in. Oh, it's fast this time. 4J 6X easy. Easy code. All right, log in. Now I'm logged in. Set username. It does have my username, but it also says welcome eric@zerve.app. That's kind of unintuitive. I guess the front end would need to query for the username. Or maybe at the time when it logs in, it should give me my username, because it's kind of an inconsistency. It does make sense to show like the email address when I have a crap temporary username, but I don't have a temporary username. I have a real username at this point. So let me just see. I'm gonna like log out, log back in via email. I'm going to see what comes through the API to see if it does give me my real username. OVX JDO. Okay. And what did it give me? If I create session response. Response was null. Why though? Why was the response null? Probably, oh wait, because there's two different calls to create session, and the second one is where they actually send me the session ID, session token, and user ID. It does include the user ID. Okay, so it's a front end thing. We just need to like save the user ID into the session object, basically, probably. But yeah, I'm not going to fix that now. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a problem on the back end, and that like when you log in, we do give the front end the real user ID. So this is just a presentation error. Okay, so now like if we tap into stores, these are my stores. And if we'll demonstrate our issue by going to store/ Eric, my current username, and great. So this is the store, and I want to make sure that this gets renamed and like starts to 404 when I rename my user. So I come back here and I go back again to actually get to the real homepage of the user. It's really confusing. Whatever though. I'm going to rename this to just to E. My new username is E. It's really badass. And now if I refresh this, it'll be like, store does not exist. Could not find Eric the Great. But if we go to E, it's here. And I'm pretty confident that it's continuing to use the cached store, the cached memory store. So it's not like having to reload a bunch of data. And it was a very fast operation. Not like it needs to be fast when you change your username. Like that's one of those things that could be super slow. No one actually cares. Okay, and before when I changed my username, like the GUI like screwed up and forgot about my session, so I'm going to refresh to see if that happens again. I'd like to understand. Okay, so that was just a fluke error. That was just, that'll never happen again, I'm sure. Just because it happened that one time, and it didn't happen this time, that means that somehow it's been fixed. Okay, so as far as the backend perspective goes, I'm pretty happy with this. There's different stores, they're being queried, it's all being kind of exposed through the GUI here. There's the ability to create a new store, like lol. The lol store already exists. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. He's been making some bad content. All right. Oh gosh. Just testing that we can create a new store. Yeah, and then I don't know, like everything's working now. I'll commit this code because I'm really happy with the progress that has been made. I need to find an appropriate emoji. What about this little like Space Invader emoji? Okay, so multiple stores per user. And I'll say that this is on Zebra because this is only a feature that we've added to the Zebra part of the code base. Ha 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 ha. Or nay, whatever it is that a Zebra says. So we have create store and we've committed our code. Like we're in a good state to just charge forward with some org stuff. Shall we? Shall we? I'll see how far I can get in like half an hour, and I won't beat myself up over it because it's like I'm gonna need to eat. It's almost 1 p.m. Haven't eaten at all. I went to sleep at like 4 or 5 in the morning for some reason because I was gonna stream last night, and then I just like decided not to. So this is last night's stream that I'm doing with about the same energy levels because I only got a few hours of sleep. So there's create store. What about create org? Ooh, why not? Let's let users create an org. That was my pog face. If you're familiar with Twitch culture, you know what that is. Otherwise, you're like, the fuck is he talking about? Pog face? Okay, new concept called org ID. And I'm also going to have a new concept probably called account ID, or maybe an entity ID. I like entity ID because an entity can basically be either an org or a user. And before I get confused by this junk, I'm going to delete. Wait, why is it called get memory store dir? I screwed up some renaming process here. Because it doesn't make sense that there would be a memory store directory. I'm just going to call this get entity store directory. Because yeah, that's the whole point of having an entity, is that like you can use similar structure in the file system or when we're saving. So it's called user data, But user data refers to user data of the entire system, so it is still user data. But when you create an org, we basically want to create a new directory here. But also org is kind of tied into the authentication system for one reason in particular, and that's that you can't have usernames and organizations that have the same name. So I might just not include orgs in the authentication system to keep it simple, but I will make it so that when you're creating an org or renaming an org, which might be possible in the future, we will check to make sure that a user does not already exist with that ID, because that would be conflict time. That would be bad conflict. Okay, so we've already done a good renaming here because get entity store. So I'm going to rename a few things here from user ID to entity ID in preparation for there being org scoped stores. So get memory store will take a entity ID. Woohoo. Oops, I selected one too many. Let's see if VS Code wants to help me. Oh, thanks. Okay, and all right. Oh, I renamed the wrong thing. And now VS Code does not want to help me. So there's a VS Code shortcut, by the way, if you're not familiar, with function F2, and it lets you rename a variable name. But it's not coming up with the prompt to rename the variable name. But it lets me rename this one. No, it just got confused. I don't know what's going on with VS Code. I feel so sorry for it. Okay. So now there's an entity ID, and you're calling get memory store. And when you're querying for stores, this is when you're querying, so there's different ways to sort of query for don't worry, I'm not having a stroke. My brain is still working, despite all evidence to the contrary. So these are basically the user stores, effectively, because they're literally scoped on the user domain. So, oh, and by the way, I just duplicated create store, I think, without renaming it to create org. But creating an org has the same thing. You pass it a string, which should really be validated as a slug, so that you can't have weird characters and stuff. It needs to be a URL safe string. I'll delete this implementation because it doesn't mean squat. And create org. I don't know why this saying you can't find it, because TypeScript is just chugging along, playing catch up for these changes that I made 30 seconds ago. Anyways, there's a new action here called create org. And we'll create an org for what company is going to adopt ZERVE first, right? Maybe a cool company like Expo. Expo needs something like ZERVE, surely. We've just deleted the entire implementation though, so of course it's not going to go and create anything. And we're going to need to come up with our own sort of very simple data structure for what a ZERVE, what an entity is, or what an org actually means on the file system. Now maybe the authentication system can have some place where it's oh, there's something that takes up the spot of a user. Let me just remind myself in the simplest way possible by looking at some example data. Auth system has users. Maybe it should be auth/entities instead of auth/users. And then here, there's user.json. And because it's a user, like it makes sense that there would be a okay, so yeah, this is like metadata about the user as far as like how you're able to, like what different authentication mechanisms allow you to log in as this user. So what if we renamed everything that says user.json and users in the authentication system to entities? And then just kind of made it so that you can have a different type of entity. I think that makes a lot of sense because this users directory is currently the way that we disambiguate between different users, and we make sure that you can't create two users with the same username. Like if I just create a new folder in here called fail user, now I should not, like, I'm just doing some simple tests in order to like sanity check my own world here. I'm doing a refresh because I'm like not super confident in the client, I guess. So I'll set username to fail user. And it says, oh, this user already exists. And this error code is not, or this error presentation is really bad because this is an actual, this would result in a crash because we're not catching this error and presenting it properly to the user. But from the back-end perspective, it's caught this exact issue. It says, oh, you can't go and rename to something that already exists. And it's not that the user properly exists in any way, it's just an empty directory, but I've created this here. So, so now, for example, like if I come and refresh and I go set username to fail user, it's happily renaming it. And then I'll set my username back to something reasonable like Eric. And yeah, quickly, like it's been renaming this file on my file system this whole time. Like I'll just rename my username to EV. And it's renamed it here on the file system. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So create org. Like let's go into the authentication code and rename a bunch of variables and stuff. We even need to rename this reference to this users directory. So I'll rename this from users to entities, because that's our new word for, okay, it's gotten a little bit confused. All my code is very confused. I'm just going to shut down the server until I've renamed that properly. I'll delete this user directory that it created out of confusion. And so like see where it says users? There's probably like some path join with users. Yeah, and this is all in the auth code. This needs to be entities. This needs to be entities. This should say entities. Am I spelling that right? That's kind of a funny word. Okay, so now maybe that immediate issue is fixed, but then a lot of places here in the code are still going to refer to it as a user. Quite reasonably, I suppose. Something like logout would only make sense for a user, but yeah, now we're in authentication code. We've made the jump. It's getting worse. The stream is devolving. So we don't want to expose, I don't think the auth system should be exposing entities directly to the end user. So does the auth system have the ability to have internal behavior? Or does the auth system just always return like a meta container? Create Z meta container. Great. Yeah, that's a little confusing. Because the auth should maybe also expose internal behavior, internal only behavior. So we could fix that, right? It's called create Z auth or something. Create auth It's just called create auth. Because this is not even a Z concept, is it? What do you think? I see, we have a separate package called that. Okay. Okay. We're just going to make this change because we're brave. So const z auth and also other stuff. And that's going to be coming out of create auth. And one of those things that we might have, for example, is create entity and get entity. And then maybe a few other things. But these are just going to be two functions in addition to the Z that's coming out of create auth. Okay, so down here when we're returning the behavior from the authentication system, this only happens, by the way, when the server starts up. We're going to return zauth, but we're also going to return these other functions, such as create entity and get entity. Those things don't exist yet, though. Create entity, and maybe there's like an async function, and get entity. I don't know what we're doing to TypeScript, but it's probably not going to be happy with us. Create entity has probably a entity ID, which is a string, and some metadata. And that's like going to be a, we don't really know what this is. It's a entity. I'm just going to say like any for now. I don't really know what this is. Get entity, you're going to specify the entity ID. And it will return an entity data, which is any. Oh gosh, it's so gross. I regret it already. So we've probably broken our other servers that have authentication. Or there's only one other server that has authentication, but we've broken it because we've changed the API of get auth, of create auth. So I'll go fix that quickly as well. I'm not going to test it because I'm just going to have confidence in myself. Okay, that looks fixed. For now, at least, because we are not going to worry about entities in that other server, at least for the foreseeable future. But yeah, like it does need to have some, the auth system, because we want the org and the users to share the same namespace. We really want these things to be part of the same system. So create entity and get entity. Are we going to do anything with that? Like let's do our plumbing. Let's do some plumbing. Oh, and by the way, auth here is zauth. All right? All right? Yeah, okay. So create entity needs to be used by stuff in this file. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hoist up the auth stuff, so that way it's all kind of defined earlier on in the module. So that way it's going to be available to our multi-tenancy code. Right after the auth file seems like an intuitive place to do it. I like it when a file kind of tells a story. And here's the story. The story is first we're doing setup chunk, and we're like setting up our secrets, our internal secrets, and we're using those secrets to set up our SMS and email capability. We're also setting up the files for the authentication system. And then we're using the email, the SMS, and those auth files to set up an authentication system. And then I'm skipping over what's going on inside of handle user ID change because it's a little weird. And then then we're going to use create entity, this new thing that we're working on, down here later on, sometime, maybe. Get user Zeds. We're warm. We're warm, I can feel it. Inside of create org, okay. This is going to be like await, create entity, org, ID. What could go wrong? Lots of things, obviously. And also we're passing a metadata into create entity, for example. So like owner, this is a nice thing to have. The owner is the user ID. Owner is, yeah, the owner is implied, but I'm going to be explicit as hell here because this is like critical security code that we don't want people to be misunderstanding. So this is the owner user ID. And so basically we're going to want to save this into a file, but for now, inside of create entity, I'm just going to do a little console.log because we just want to have some sanity checking before we charge forward. Entity ID and entity data. Okay. Let's see if this works. Oh, we haven't even been running our server this entire time, so now I'm like nervous. The other thing is there's all sorts of additional like variable name changes that I need to make inside of this massive authentication file. But whatever, let's just see what burns. Okay, I'm still logged in. Not terrible things are happening so far with the authentication system. So I'll tap create org and foo, or ZERVE is a nice organization name. Creating entity ZERVE with the owner user ID set to EV. What happens when the username changes though? Like, that's not good. When the username changes, we need to like go through all of the organizations that the user is a part of and change their user ID. Like maybe we should have some opaque internal identifier that never has to change. I think that would be pretty smart. If only I had the benefit of hindsight when I was writing that code. So I think that's how other systems will tend to do it. But the other thing is when you're creating the entity, you also want to kind of save in the user what the entity is. So do we have the ability to read and write user metadata from the auth system? We could add that here as part of this new set of functions that we're exposing internally to the server. Because probably there's some internal function here for that. Get Z logged in user. Get the set password action. Oh my. Get the set username action and a bunch of schemas. I'm literally just reading my code or scanning it because this guy is pretty confused. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to charge forward with the sort of mistakes at hand here. So, create user session, okay. Like eventually I hope someone comes in and rewrites all of this code and does all of it without making any breaking changes to the system that will be highly a big commercial success, I'm sure. create session with password. So yeah, most of the functions in here are just working directly with the files. So I think we're just going to continue with that. And with the files, I mean through the file system abstraction that I'm using here, but I wasn't using in the other place. This is not too big of a difference to use these. This is a very shallow abstraction, these authentication files abstraction, but it's been given to us basically as a module that's like a safely scoped module. So that's one of the points of this abstraction, is you can give access to a directory to a different piece of code and have confidence that that code will only be writing, not absolute confidence because it's still JavaScript, that code could do whatever it wants, but as long as you're basically using this module to access the files, then you're only accessing files within that directory. Okay, so there's authenticators and there's user IDs, and also there's a few references to what's known as user.json. Oh, this is something that I do trust myself to find and replace. So I'll change this to entity.json. And then I am going to go quit the server, go into my entity, and change this to because like I'm just doing a manual migration for now, because I'm still doing dramatic changes to the structure here. So for example, when we do create entity, what we will do is we'll check to see if it exists first. User files dot z dot I don't know. So user files is a system files. Path exists. Exists. Oh, I see, there's a stat. Stat could be used probably instead of exists, but I will just go ahead and create an exists. Why not? Why not write some more code? Okay, so this is how it sort of does that. It ensures no path escape, and then it creates the full path by combining the path that's being provided in. So it's an async function where we pass the path as a string. I assume it's a string anyways. And now we have the full path, and we can just return await path exists full path. And as long as we import these schemas, I think we're going to have a working exists function available on our files Z logical container doohickey. So we're back in the auth abstraction. And we're going to check if it exists. And you pass in the path of, what is the user data path? Oh, it's literally just in user data, right? No, it's inside of entities. files.z.path.value. Okay, no, user files already is the correct location. So don't get it twisted. You're so confused, Eric. Why have you confused yourself? Why have you overcomplicated it? So we're querying user file. So basically, if the entity ID exists, now you throw new request error. An entity named, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be throwing this sort of error. Maybe we should be throwing some weird error that does not reveal that this entity exists. Like if I try to create an entity called Apple and it says, oh, this entity already exists, then you're going to know that Apple Incorporated, the Apple, is using ZERVE. And that might be something that Apple doesn't want you to know. But whatever. I'm sure they're going to just pay me a lot of money to spin up a separate enterprise instance anyways. You know how it is. They love supporting open source projects. Okay. So now we're going to basically, we should have an error if you try to create something that has the same ID as a user or an existing org. But now we can do perhaps user files await create makedir dot call, and it has a slightly different ID. You pass in the path, and then we also want to do a write JSON or something. Is that what it's called? I assume so. Right, let me just see who's calling entity.json. It probably looks just like this. User data path, and then you use the user data path. So there's write JSON and read JSON. Who would have thunk it? That's incredible. Ha 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 ha. Okay. You can provide the value, and the value is the entity data. Okay, and it returns null, basically. It returns a promise of nothing. So get entity is going to return the entity ID. Great. Whatever that is. It's going to return the entity value, which is going to be comprised of basically this. And this should never be exposed to the end user. This is meant for internal server use only. And we're kind of breaking the auth abstraction by exposing this stuff, but it's going to be, it'll be kind. We will find some way to protect ourselves, or we'll just have to be careful. It's really up to us. Read JSON. And then return entity value. Okay, I don't know. Let's see if we've done any good stuff here. Create entity, and you pass in the owner user ID. And then we also probably want to we can have a new function for writing the entity and reading the entity of the user. So for example, let's just for demonstration purposes, get entity. Await get entity user ID. Because user is also an entity. Const lol user. And then we'll do console.log. Why did I assign this into a variable? I don't know. Lol user. This is Eric's org fever dream. because we're going to want to save in the user like what organizations it's affiliated with. Maybe not saving anything else other than just like, oh, there's a potential affiliation with these orgs. And the reason why is because when we go to change the username, we also need to go and change any sort of ownership or roles that they may have inside of an org. And we're so far away from having like roles. But anyways, let's see if we can create an org. Wouldn't that be cool? I think that'd be super dope. That'd be lit if we could just like have our code work for us. Now that anyone who's listening to this is like cringing out of their mind. Z. Let's just create an organization called Z. User files is not defined. Well, at least you have a sensible error presentation now. User files? Yeah, it doesn't exist. What was it called elsewhere in this module? I thought there was something called user files. Is it like users files or something crazy like that? Am I crazy? Is it users files? There's a lot of references to users files. Only one reference to user file. Okay. Let's try again. Did it not reload the server? I don't understand. Okay, wait, look, it logged out the state, so it probably worked. Yeah, I went and created a new entity.json, and the entity.json has the owner ID. Whoa! Great news. I'm probably going to take a break for lunch soon. And I'll maybe come back with a part 2 in like an hour or two. I don't know. But I will try to take a significant lunch and maybe even a nap. A lunch and a nap, killer combo. Killer combo. That's a great way to start the second half of your day. Can't find name request error. Okay. So we have an error in our error handling code. I'm just going to try and fix this right now, because that should just come out of ZERVE core, where it's just like the grab bag of dependency list stuff. It's like ZERVE core has all of the things that should be basically have no other dependencies. Okay, so now let's see what happens if I try to create a org that's Z. Okay, an entity named Z already exists. All right, and what's my username? My username is EV. So if an entity named EV already exists. Wow. Working errors when I try to create invalid organizations. And so the org that I'm creating has this metadata of owner user ID. So there's get entity, and then, but I'm probably also going to need like something like write entity. I'll call it mutate entity because I think that's just a cooler thing. Well, no, I'll just call it write entity. Let's keep it simple. We don't need to like overestimate our like transaction abilities here. This is just the file system after all. This is like not over-engineered. It's arguably under-engineered, but I like to keep things simple and understandable. And as crazy as this stuff has been, this has been really easy code to write, like this entire stream, because I've basically just been writing against the file system in patterns that I can understand. They're big trade-offs, but I can understand them at least. And it returns nothing. It returns like a promise of nothing. I promise you nothing. And you, I promise you entity ID, or entity data, which we don't know the shape of because it's kind of up to the application for what the entity data is. Like this owner user ID, that's not an official entity data pattern. Anyways, now we've got lol user. Maybe I should just rename this to user entity data. And then I'll go ahead and do await write entity, which I haven't grabbed. Let's grab it. Okay, TypeScript is not happy with my lack of annotation on create auth. So the user entity data, what did that include? That includes like the authenticator IDs, which is basically like what are the different IDs or the different authenticators, like how can this user log in effectively? But we don't really care what else is on here. We're just going to say that affiliated orgs, affiliated entities, I'll just say affiliated orgs, because this at least I can understand. That's all that really matters, right? Before we actually create let's just grab the user entity first, because in case this does fail, we don't want to move forward with this whole process at all. And we're going to spread, in case you already have some orgs that you've created, we want to spread that shit. So now we can go ahead and write this org ID. So now when we do change your username, now it's up to us to go basically look at the affiliated orgs and go and move those. So maybe we also need a move entity function. I don't know. I'd say that once we get some of these org basics working, I'm going to take a big break. Probably just the ability to like create an org and rename your user and still have your username follow the org. Because this is really mundane stuff that is like, I'm not proud of this. Because like, if this were a relational database, like this would not be a problem at all. But because I just have like refused all dependencies, I want this to be shit simple working on the file system. It's this messy thing where files have to refer to each other. And if the application explodes in the middle of one of these processes, then not only is there like potentially corrupt data, but the data is, it can result in user privacy issues, permission issues, in weird, terrible edge cases. So like I want to be as careful as I can be with this sort of thing. Lol user. Okay, so I feel like this is either going to work and do what I want it to do, or it's just going to be a disaster. So only one way to find out, right? Okay, an entity named EV already exists. So I'm going to delete some of the stuff here because Z like effectively did not exist properly. So now I'm going to create a new. Okay, write entity is not a function. Oh, okay, I just didn't expose it. I wrote the function, but I did not expose it. And again, now we're probably in this weird state. Like, my user probably has an affiliated entity. No, it doesn't, because the write entity could not be written. But here, I'll delete that, and now we get to try again. No error, that's nice. So now let's take a look at what the file state is. It's created a new entity.json with the owner set to EV. And if we go into EV and look at that entity.json, it has an affiliated org with this new org ID. So I would say that much is working, but we need to handle the user renaming themselves case. Like, not that it's like a cool situation to have to deal with. But we are where we are. I would be kidding myself if it were any other way. So handle user ID change. I'm just going to assume that it's going to give me the actual user entity, the entity data, which, as we all know, is an any. It's our favorite type in TypeScript. Any. It's the most powerful type, actually. That's actually, you can't even argue against that. Okay, handle user ID change, entity data. So let's make it so that handle user ID change actually includes the entity data. Do we have it handy, or do we need to read it? It's called the user data. But it's also the entity data. And there is a type for it. Where'd I go? Where'd I go? I lost myself. Okay, and then I just need to make sure that, are we writing to this entity data at the time when we're doing a user ID change? You go through every authenticator ID and you change the authentication file. So we already have this issue kind of where we need to, like at the time when the username is changing, we're like changing all of these different things. But hey, whatever, okay. we can re-architect this at some point later on if it causes us big troubles, but I don't think that it will as long as we pay attention at this phase. Handle user ID change. Okay, so now at the time, we're just going to assume this is going to work, where we get the entity data at the time when we're renaming the user. And what we'll do is we will do one of these lovely await promise dot all. We're going to do like several things at once here. We're going to say basically we're going to iterate over all of the entity data dot affiliated orgs. And if there's no affiliated orgs, like we're going to iterate over an empty array. And we're going to map that and say for each one of these things, we're going to asynchronously handle the affiliated org, which is a string. And what we're going to do is we will say basically handle changing the affiliated org for this user. This is really dense, painful stuff. Like I hope no one's watching this. And if so, I'm so sorry. I think I might be missing a parenthesis or something. Okay, good. So at least I can now do the thing that I was hoping to do. So what we're going to do here is we're basically going to, for each of these orgs, we're going to read, and then we're going to write. Get entity, and then write entity. It's the affiliated org ID. Let's be explicit here. Let's not. Did I spell affiliated right? I don't think I did. I think I've been like changing. I don't even know how to spell affiliated. But I think there's an A in there somewhere, or a second A. Affiliated. All right. So now, then we're going to basically do a write entity. And it's going to be an async situation here. Or by async, I mean we're going to await the behavior of both getting and writing. And when we write, we're going to basically say, well, okay, so these are the orgs that you're like are potentially affiliated with. You might be considered the owner, right? It's called owner. It's owner user ID. Remember how explicit I was being? Who could regret being so explicit? Owner user ID. The new entity is a spread of the entity data. And then just if the entity data dot owner user ID is equal to the prev user ID, then we're going to basically modify the new entity. Hello, I'm just going to copy and paste because I can't even type anymore. The new entity dot owner user ID is equal to the user ID. And then we're going to write the new entity. Okay. Let's see. I hope this works. Oh, can we just go back? Let's just go back. Let's get out of here. Okay, if this works, I'm going to call this stream a wrap, and then I'm going to come back in an hour or two and see how much I can complete the server side of orgs, because I think it'll be really cool to get that working. Or at least make it so that orgs have owners, and maybe orgs can also have like members. Huh? Yeah. And then it's just like if you're a member of an org, then you have basically full reign over the content in that org. And that the owner may be the only one who's able to modify the members. I think that's a intuitive way, a very simple but intuitive org model that we could potentially even launch a usable service with. Type instantiation is excessively deep and possibly infinite. TypeScript, I need you to do your job. I know you get tired. I get tired too. But TypeScript, please, please. Okay. Let's test it. Let's test it. I'm not sure if everything is broken or not, so I'm just going to kind of restart the server. Everything seems broken. This is like a terrible typo that I have. Who did this? Okay. This is all it needs to do. Okay. So we've created an org. Now if we try to rename ourselves, and we're not even like using this org or displaying it to the user through the API at all, so like we have some stuff to fix. But maybe I'll create another org just for shits and giggles. Giggles. I'll just call it giggles. I almost called it shits. So now we've got two orgs that are both owned by this one user. And we like go into giggles, for example, and we look at the metadata. It says that there's the user ID set to me. Okay, great. So now I'm going to come in here and change my username. Set username EV, or it's just EVV. Okay, so now we're going to see like if the organization reflects that change. It does. And for example, if I go into my user, entity.json, it refers to both of my affiliated orgs. So I could use that to make it so that orgs are queryable. But just one step ahead of the next, I'm going to commit these changes. Do we have like a cool icon for orgs? Maybe like a family? Maybe the family emoji would be good. Or company, building. Well, there's like this one looks like an institution, like a bank. I like the bank icon. Okay. So org entities start initial progress. Initial progress. It's like they're two different meanings. All right, I'm going to publish these changes. Thank you, anyone who's made it so far. You know, I've published this stuff to GitHub, so like I fully expect you to be able to follow along with this stuff if you're interested. I'm going to take a lunch, and I will come back in just an hour or two after a little bit of rest and relaxation. But check out the code on GitHub. And if you want to chat with me, best place to do it is probably Discord. I'd love to get this Discord community active. And I'd love to help mentor you on any sort of aspect of the ZERVE development if you want to contribute. And if you want to use ZERVE as a user, right now it's best to just follow along and hang out. But also, like, let me know what you think of the product that I'm building as I'm building it. Like, I don't want you to be surprised, like, oh, I didn't know it was going to work like that. No. Let's keep the dialogue going. Thanks for joining me so far. Obviously, like, this is a very, let's say, early stage community. There's not too many active people, like, in the Discord or hanging out with me on Twitter. Oh yeah, did you know there's a Twitter? Or I have a Twitter account. But there's also a ZERVE Twitter account that you can @ and I will see. And also, I'm making some content on YouTube every once in a while. It's not the best content, but it's also probably not the worst. So thanks for joining.